Some people seem to receive without chasing, while others keep pushing and somehow end up more tired than closer. It looks like talent. It looks like luck. But what you are really seeing is the difference between allowing life to move and trying to drag it forward. We are taught to equate effort with progress. So when reality does not respond, the instinct is to push harder, to tighten control, to prove that we are doing enough. Yet the more force we apply, the more we reveal a quiet inner message. Something here is not at ease. Manifestation does not respond to how hard you try. It responds to how internally settled you are. When your inner world pulls in different directions, the signal becomes distorted. One part longs for change. Another braces for disappointment. A third is not sure it deserves the result at all. From the inside, this feels like motivation. From the field, it feels like static. A system that is tense cannot move into unfamiliar territory. It holds the shape of what it already knows. Safety is prioritized over expansion. This is why effort, when driven by inner pressure, tends to reproduce the same outcomes. Not because the universe resists you, but because your own system is guarding the familiar. Those who receive with ease are not indifferent. They are coherent. Their desire is not tangled with urgency. Their identity is not waiting to be repaired by a future event. There is no inner debate about whether the outcome is allowed. And because there is no internal argument, movement becomes smooth. In the quantum view, reality is not built through force. It is shaped through selection. Before any experience takes form, it exists as many possible expressions. These possibilities do not compete for your effort. They wait for clarity. They resolve when awareness is stable enough to choose without conflict. When attention is split between wanting and worrying, between hoping and scanning for proof, the system hovers in uncertainty. Nothing lands. Not because the field withholds, but because the chooser is unsettled. Trying harder often feels responsible, but internally it can signal distrust toward the present moment. A subtle statement that what is here is not enough, and whatever state you inhabit consistently is the state reality learns to reflect. Ease is not passivity, it is the absence of inner resistance. It is caring without gripping. It is moving forward without asking the future to fix your nervous system. When desire arises from fullness, it opens doors. When desire arises from lack, it delays the opening. Not as punishment, but as precision. And once this is seen, a different question naturally forms. If reality responds to internal stability rather than effort, what is actually happening within the body and mind of those who receive without struggle? Every time the mind checks whether the result has arrived, it quietly affirms that it has not. That assumption becomes part of the inner climate being expressed. From a quantum perspective, pressure does not resolve potential. It suspends it. The state remains undecided because the signal remains divided. Those who receive with ease are not intensifying desire. They are softening contradiction. Their awareness is no longer swinging between expectation and doubt. It rests. And in that resting, consciousness regains its natural function. It chooses without friction. This is why outcomes often appear when people stop trying to orchestrate them. As attention loosens, the inner environment grows quieter. As the nervous system leaves alert mode, awareness becomes available. When awareness becomes available, reality can reorganize. Not because something new begins to listen, but because the interference has fallen away. This also explains why many mental practices fall flat. Repeating words or images while the body remains tense creates two conflicting broadcasts. The mind declares one direction, the physiology announces another. A divided signal cannot stabilize into a clear experience. Manifestation is not a cognitive exercise. It is a condition of being. When coherence is present, outcomes that match that coherence resolve without strain. No persuasion is required. No inner negotiation is necessary. This is why some shifts seem to arrive unexpectedly. From the outside, the timing appears random. From the inside, it often follows a season of emotional neutrality. A quiet that is not emptiness, but readiness without demand. And here is the layer most people overlook. If coherence depends on the nervous system, then the work is not about forcing new thoughts. It is about shaping the internal conditions in which consciousness operates. The field does not respond to what you desire in theory. It responds to the state you are inhabiting while the desire is present. Consciousness does not act in isolation. It expresses itself through the nervous system, and the tone of that system determines whether new possibilities can resolve or whether experience keeps looping familiar patterns. When the nervous system is organized around survival, awareness becomes narrow. Energy is spent scanning, anticipating, preparing. These states are effective for managing threats, but they fragment attention. Awareness is pulled between memory and projection, between what is missing and what might go wrong. In this fragmentation, no unified selection can settle. Those who move with ease inhabit a different rhythm. Their inner state is alert without being tight, focused without being strained. The body is not signaling urgency or deficiency, and because the body is not sounding an alarm, attention can remain present. This matters because reality does not respond to intention alone. It responds to the total signal being broadcast, thought, sensation, and emotional tone combined. When the body is braced, even the clearest intention becomes distorted at the source. A system trained to protect the familiar will keep recreating familiar outcomes. Not out of failure, but out of fidelity to what it believes is safe. No new experience can resolve through a structure designed to preserve the old. Ease begins when the nervous system releases the need to manage outcomes. Control is not a spiritual quality, it is a protective reflex. It arises when trust in the present moment is absent. But creation requires a different ground, a sense of internal safety. When the body feels safe, attention settles. When attention settles, awareness stabilizes. When awareness stabilizes, consciousness can select rather than react. This is why surrender is so often misunderstood. It is not the abandonment of desire. It is the removal of the internal tension that prevents desire from resolving into experience. Surrender is first a biological shift. Only later does it become a philosophical one. And when people say they stopped caring and things finally changed, what they actually stopped doing was signaling that something was missing. They stopped searching for signs. They stopped preparing for letdown. The system returned to a calm baseline. And in that baseline, a quiet shift occurs. The mind no longer petitions reality to change. It begins to relate to life as if movement is already underway. This is not fantasy. It is internal agreement. In quantum language, coherence means every layer of the system is speaking the same truth. Cognition, emotion, and physiology are no longer sending mixed messages. When the signal is unified, consciousness knows which possibility can settle into experience. This is why change feels immediate for some and unreachable for others. The difference is not merit, it is regulation. You cannot command coherence into existence. You create the conditions for it by quieting what contradicts it. When coherence is present, reality does not require direction. It reorganizes. Probabilities tilt. Circumstances rearrange. Not because you insisted, but because nothing inside is resisting the arrival. This reveals something most people avoid acknowledging. Transformation is not about building a future. It is about dissolving the internal patterns that keep reenacting the past. When those patterns loosen, movement resumes on its own. One of the most confusing phases appears right before change. People expect intensity. They look for emotional surges, certainty, or dramatic confirmation. What often arrives instead is neutrality, not dullness, not absence, a quiet steadiness. In this state, desire no longer tugs at attention. The future does not feel postponed. The outcome stops occupying emotional space. To an untrained mind, this can feel like disengagement, as if something important has gone silent. But this quiet is not loss. It is internal resolution. When emotion stops leaning into the outcome, it signals that inner opposition has dissolved. The system is no longer wavering between wanting and waiting. The identity that needed the result to feel complete has softened. And this matters because reality does not organize around wanting. It organizes around identity. In physical systems, change resolves when stability is reached. In human experience, that stability is felt as emotional neutrality. The nervous system is no longer scanning for confirmation. The mind is no longer rehearsing what might happen. Attention returns to the present not through discipline, but because there is nothing left to manage. This is why people later say, "It happened when I stopped thinking about it." What dissolved was not desire, but pressure. The body stopped broadcasting deficiency, the mind stopped narrating delay, awareness became available. Excitement can keep the loop active. It leans forward. It contains anticipation. And anticipation quietly affirms that the experience is still elsewhere. Neutrality carries a different message. It communicates inwardly that nothing is absent. On a biological level, neutrality reflects a state of safety. The system no longer needs to predict, and prediction is what binds experience to repetition. When prediction relaxes, probability can reorganize. This is also why forced positivity tends to collapse under pressure. A pleasant expression layered over tension does not create unity. Affirming while internally monitoring maintains division. Consciousness cannot select freely while the system is waiting for proof. Those who move with ease are not more optimistic. They are more integrated. They let desire pass through without attaching their identity to it. They set intention without revisiting it emotionally. And they trust the stillness that follows rather than interpreting it as a loss of momentum. If you have noticed a strange calm where urgency used to live, that is not regression, it is completion. The signal has already been transmitted, the system has settled, and once it settles, the outer world adjusts on its own timing. Here is the paradox. The moment you stop checking whether it is working is often the moment movement begins. Not because attention creates change, but because change requires interference to end. If you can sense that quiet inside yourself now, not as an idea, but as a felt state, there is a simple way to acknowledge it. Not to persuade the mind, but to let the body recognize the coherence it is already holding. There is a quiet misunderstanding that disrupts more outcomes than uncertainty, fear, or disbelief combined. It appears the moment manifestation is treated as a practice instead of a way of being. When it becomes a method, a routine, or a strategy, you subtly locate yourself outside the life you intend to inhabit. Methods imply absence. Identity functions from presence. Those who move with ease are not performing manifestation. They are settled into a state where the desired condition feels ordinary, not dramatic, not miraculous, simply part of how life is structured. That ordinariness is what allows change to occur without friction. From a quantum lens, this is coherent. Consciousness does not resolve experience from the stance of trying to arrive. It resolves experience from the stance of already standing there. The observer does not pursue what is observed. The observer establishes the frame within which experience takes form. When someone repeatedly checks techniques, cycles through methods, or seeks reassurance that something is working, they quietly reaffirm separation from the outcome. The body stays in a subtle posture of waiting. The system remains slightly inclined toward the future. That gentle forward tilt is enough to keep experience unresolved. This is why many people feel depleted by manifestation practices. Not because they are demanding, but because they keep the system in performance mode. Identity remains organized around becoming rather than stabilizing. At a certain point, those who move smoothly stop managing the process. They stop emotionally revisiting the desire. They stop narrating progress to themselves. They stop explaining what is unfolding. What takes the place of that effort is quieter and far more potent. Embodiment. Embodiment means the inner world no longer references the outcome as future. Choices, pacing, emotional responses, and inner dialogue are no longer shaped by anticipation. They are shaped by congruence. You move as someone whose life already accommodates what was once a request. This is not performance, it is adaptation. The nervous system has recalibrated. The body is no longer braced. The mind is no longer rehearsing. Awareness is no longer split between now and later. From here, manifestation is not initiated. It unfolds. In quantum terms, the system resolves when interference withdraws. In lived experience, this feels like motion without strain. Connections align, timing shifts, openings appear without being forced. And the more you attempt to analyze the mechanics, the more easily interference can return. This is the paradox many struggle to accept. The less you attempt to employ manifestation, the more experience seems to arrange itself through you. When identity stabilizes, reality has nothing left to negotiate. Results do not arrive as rewards, they arrive as natural consequences of alignment. And when this becomes clear, the question changes. Not how to accelerate results, but which inner state you consistently return to. At a certain stage, the inquiry is no longer whether this works. It becomes whether coherence can be sustained. Because coherence, once accessed, must be maintained. Otherwise, the system quietly drifts back into effort without noticing. This is where many unknowingly reset their momentum. They touch alignment, they feel the quiet, they experience neutrality. Then they resume measuring, interpreting, and waiting. The field does not punish this shift, it reflects it. Manifestation is not about reaching a peak, it is about normalizing coherence. When regulation becomes baseline, identity is no longer organized around efficiency. Attention is no longer searching for confirmation. Life does not feel theatrical, it feels responsive. Subtle adjustments begin to accumulate. Outer circumstances rearrange without announcement. Movement unfolds without being driven. This is what people mean when they say things started happening automatically. Not because they learned a secret procedure, but because they stopped reintroducing inner contradiction. From here, the work is not creation, it is maintenance. Not visualization, but stabilization. Not asking, but remaining. Support matters at this stage, not to provide something new, but to help you stay with what you have already accessed. To prevent the mind from returning to effort, to keep the nervous system anchored in coherence long enough for experience to complete its reorganization. That is why this path is not meant to be followed as a method, it is meant to be lived as a way of settling back into coherence. Not to achieve something new, but to remain where clarity has already begun to form. If you sense that something within you has quietly reorganized, there is no need to chase another peak experience. The work now is simpler, to stay with the state you have touched, to allow it to become familiar rather than extraordinary. When coherence becomes familiar, manifestation loses its dramatic quality. It no longer feels like a rare event. It feels like a natural response to an internal condition that has stabilized. And as experience begins to move without resistance, a subtle understanding emerges. You were never meant to impose change upon reality. You were meant to become clear enough that movement could arise on its own. At that point, the path no longer feels like effort. It feels like remembering how to stop interfering.